Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Well, today's video is going to be about engines and tractors. Over the weekend we went to a show that the first time they put one on, and it was kind of a small show, but still a lot of neat stuff there, and you get to meet a lot of interesting people. So anyway, I'm going to start out talking about engines and tractors, like I say, and how they intertwine, just like I did on my flashlights and other stuff and bicycles, so that you can start out in one hobby and then you can branch out in a bunch of others, so that you have all that inclusive good stuff. So anyway, this is a little replica of a Waterloo Boy engine. And Waterloo Boy gas engines were made really early, right around the turn of the century, and then through the mid-20s, and then they changed the name. And so anyway, the Waterloo Boy was one of the best gas engines of its time, and during the early teens and prior to that even, they were a big seller. And the company got bought out by Deere and Company, which John Deere plows and farm equipment. And so that was about 1913, I believe. And so anyway, the first tractors they came out with volume production were called Waterloo Boy tractors, and my great-grandfather used them on his big dry farm. So they have kind of an interesting history for us. But anyway, the engines like this, that's what's called a stationary engine, or a portable engine in this case, because you've got the cart to move it around with. But most farms didn't have electricity till World War II, rural farms I should say, and so engines like these were used to run all the equipment. And you can see there's a pulley on here, and they'd have a flat leather belt, or run over to a feed grinder, or a cream separator, or washing machines, you name it. So these engines were used everywhere electric motor would be used today. So anyway, the Waterloo Boy name was phased out in 1935. John Deere came out with a Model D tractor, which they produced for clear up to I think 1952 or somewhere in there. And so anyway, here's a model of a John Deere tractor. This would be a Model A. And so, like I say, if you start out and you want to collect tractors, if you like to go and have antique tractor pulls, or even use them and farm with them like we do, you can collect Waterloo Boy engines too, or John Deere gas engines. You know, it's like I say, the hobbies all just kind of intertwine. And the Waterloo engines and tractors, though, has a requirement a lot of people don't have, and that's rich and famous. And then there's everybody else like us, which are poor and infamous, and we collect everything else. So we'll move on to the next. Well, our next vintage toy is a 1917 Fordson tractor. Henry Ford became very successful with the Model T Ford car. And anyway, he wanted to do the same thing with tractors, so he started designing and working on it, and they came up with this, which is called the Model F. And it was a game changer. It was so modern compared to virtually everything else on the market. A lot of the companies just went out of business because the stuff they had was no good, basically. So anyway, this tractor was not called a Ford tractor because someone else had used the name, and there was a tractor company that made a really bad design and failed within about a year. So Ford was trying to think of something to call a tractor, and so the company was Henry Ford and Son. So they coined the name Fordson. And like I say, from 1917 to I think it was 1954, Fordson tractors were made, and they were made in the U.S. and they were made in not so Great Britain and Ireland. So anyway, it was a game changer. Like I say, it was so more modern than anything else out there at the time. So we'll be back. Okay, well, here's another representative of a big corporation. It's McCormick Deere. They started out making wheat harvesting and grain harvesting equipment, branched out into tractors and engines. One time were the largest manufacturer in the world. Anyway, little engines like this were there again used on the farm. This is a copy of a Model M, which I made in various horsepowers. But you know, the thing that I talk about on these engines, you know, they were used on running little equipment with belts and stuff like that, but how the hobbies intertwine. So here's a McCormick Deere tractor. Now this particular model came out in 1924, made everything else obsolete, including the Fordson, because it's what's called a row crop. So the wheels here go in between the rows, and you can adjust the backs in and out so they don't crush your crops and stuff. They run right down the furrows. And so the interesting thing about these is that, you know, they renamed them Farmall later on, which a name that everybody's familiar with. It deals with tractors. But anyway, well, this tractor in particular was made for many years. In later years, they took the same basic design, same frame and everything like that, and Raymond Loewy stylized the grill, so Farmall H and M and all of those. So it was a run forever. These things were the most popular tractor model almost ever made. So anyway, there again, going back, if you like collecting engines, and then you say, oh, I need a tractor, or I need a threshing machine. Oh yeah, there you go. Just go out and hog it all up. So anyway, we're going to talk about the show. I'm going to be down there pretty quick and show you a bunch of stuff. One last thing I wanted to talk about here. This is a replica of a JIK steam tractor. And the two things that they use these for mostly, they'd run a thresher for threshing grain, and the other one was for plowing. The thing that's interesting about steam tractors is, you know, basically you have a fire back here, you have a boiler which makes steam, and the steam is what powers this cylinder here. And so even a big tractor like this is modeled after and stuff is not rated at a lot of horsepower, but they have massive torque because a steam engine, as the cylinder rotates through the back and forth in the cylinder, it has the same torque whether it's running at 5 RPM or 200 RPM. It's not like a gas engine or a diesel engine. It has to run at a certain speed to make a torque and horsepower to get the best use out of them. So these things used to pull 30 and 40 bottom plows, and you know, it took forever for the big diesel tractors to do the same type of work. Well, just talk briefly about the show again. There was a small show, but there was some neat stuff there. There was a fair amount of tractors. They had a tractor pull and a number of gas engines. The oldest one there was 1898. It was running. And so anyway, they had a couple of drag saws there, which are for cutting logs. You know, originally their trees were sawn on the ground with hand saws, misery whips as they were called, and then as gas engines became more viable, they used gasoline powered ones, and still a blade is exactly like a hand saw. And then you know, chainsaws were introduced about 1935, but didn't really become popular. And right after World War II, a few of them were imported into Canada, and that's where they started to pick up. And then of course, when they saw how much better it was to run a saw like that instead of a drag saw, which took a whole crew to move it, two people could carry the big old two-man chainsaws around. And so anyway, just interesting stuff. You know, history is still alive. You know, even though the show is small, there's still a group of enthusiasts. So if you like stuff like old tractors and engines and saws and chainsaws and all that good stuff, you should support your local shows. This particular show was in Ethel, Washington, which is just a little dot on the map, but there's a nice, great big field and stuff, so you'll see it in the video. Well, that'll be it for our exciting video today. So remember, vintage is best. Well, you should collect tractors and engines and all kinds of other good stuff like us. It's a great hobby and lots of interesting history to go with it. So we'll see you on the next video.